Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Duke Wisdom Podcast. Ben McCormick here with Clinton Weaver. We're going to talk about an upcoming matchup with Illinois, which might be Duke's most intriguing game of the season, left on its regular season schedule at least. We're going to talk about Duke's three-game winning streak since losing to Clemson, a win over Cal, a win over Stanford, and most recently a win over Virginia, as well as a little bit of bad luck on the injury train again for the Blue Devils. And then we're going to touch on the Tar Heels a little bit because that's our expertise here with us being UNC graduates and whatnot. But I think first of all, let's turn our heads uh, backward and let's talk about the Virginia and Stanford games. I think right before we started recording, we were basically like, we're not going to talk much about the Cal game. A little bit uninterested. Duke took care of business ultimately, but that one's so far in the past now that it's like, oh well, we've got more pressing matters to discuss. A big time win for Duke over Stanford, and by big time, I don't mean necessarily in a resume building way. I mean in an actual physical score. 106-70, the win there. And I think the question we raised on here for that game was how was Duke going to handle Maxime Reynal, right? How are they going to handle him inside? How was Malawach going to respond after having a pretty poor game against Clemson? Well, I think that he responded exceptionally well with a 17-point game. He did a lot of things right in that one, and I think has looked so much better since that Clemson game. Has he looked perfect? Absolutely not. But has he been much better? Definitely so. I think that's one of the main storylines for me from that Stanford game. What did you see in that one, Clinton?
Well, the big Frenchman was, as advertised, he was troublesome for Duke, particularly in the first half. I think he had 18 in the first half, and he was gesturing to the crowd at the end of the first half, be quiet. And then we kind of put him in his place in the second half. I think he had 1 point in the second half, maybe. Didn't crack 20. So
Yeah.
things kind of turned around for him and did a 180, but he was killing us in the first half. I think he had 4 3-pointers and showed an incredible shooting touch. That shot looked impossible to defend the way he was launching it from way above his head. He's 7'1", I believe, and yeah, he looks like he has a future in the pros. But that was really the only bright spot, unfortunately, for Stanford.
Well, he's going to be the ACC Player of the Year runner-up, I guess, for whatever that means, because he really shouldn't get a vote. But if you ask Corey Alexander, he might have a chance, because I think it was on the Virginia broadcast that he said Cooper Flagg might be the ACC Player of the Year. I heard that, and I went, okay, that's wrong, but okay. I think that ship sailed a while ago for that one. But right now, still a very good player. First team All ACC. There's no doubt about that. And he brought his A game in that one. Unfortunately for our beloved Duke graduate Jalen Blakes, he did not bring his A game. Maybe it was something in the air in Cameron that he just couldn't stay true to that 15 point per game. He actually reverted back to his Duke points per game of 2. So that was a little unfortunate for Jalen. I mean, I never want to see him struggle, but I guess if he's going to struggle in a game, that was the one to do it in. Um, but on Duke's side of the floor for the guards, Tyrese Proctor, that's the big story there. 23 points for Tyrese against Stanford. He now, including his 7 point game that he had against Virginia, now only needs 15 more points for the 1,000 point club. I'm a big nerd for that kind of stuff. And Duke went 7 years in between putting, I think the last guy to get in was like Emil Jefferson into the 1,000, him or Luke Kennard, or maybe it was even Grayson Allen, but they put 3 guys in 2017. And they didn't put anybody else in until Jeremy and Kyle last season. So finally, to have 2 consecutive years with guys crossing into the 1,000 point club, that's awesome because I don't think that's happened since 2014 and 2015. So it's really cool to see 2 different guys in the same or 2 years in a row. You know, 3 different guys getting into the 1,000 point club, and the first player, well, actually now the second player, I suppose, in John Shire's first class that he recruited to reach 1,000. Kyle and now Tyrese as well. So that's something to be on the lookout for. But definitely a fantastic effort from Tyrese, and I think when he's playing like that, it brings Duke to another level.
I think Tyrese has a case to be made for first team All ACC the way he's been playing. And, if Duke is going to have two players on that team, I would probably put Flagg and Tyrese before anybody else. The way he's been pretty consistent. He did have a swoon for a period of games, but most of the year he's been very consistent, and he's really showing. He's living up to the promise that he had shown in the first couple of years, far more consistently now.
That's some high praise for first team. I mean, I'm a Tyrese Proctor appreciator, but I don't know if he can get on first team. I think he's an All ACC player. I think if you're thinking first team, Cooper's obviously there. Raynal's obviously there. Chucky Hepburn probably gets a spot. Louisville's been really good. Either Chase Hunter or Ian Shefflin, probably Chase Hunter. They're going to give one spot to Clemson. That fifth spot's probably the most kind of one with wiggle room, but I think they'd probably give it to Hunter Salas from Wake Forest. I'd love to see Tyrese on second team. Third team, honestly, could happen just because of his raw stats aren't that high, and a lot of voters that don't watch every Duke game, they're looking pretty heavily at those raw stats, and Tyrese's raw stats still aren't that great. 12 point something points per game. I mean, that's good, and Duke being as much better as it is than everybody else will certainly help him get a spot on an All ACC team. I don't know about first team. I'd love to see it though. I hope you're right about that. Um,
Yeah, I'm probably
but
wrong, but wishful thinking. I'm biased, and I admit it. I'd like to see two Duke players. If we were one game shy of a perfect season in the ACC, it's not unusual for that team to have a couple of players represented on first team. But you're probably right.
yeah, I think when you look at some of the teams that have two guys on first, the ones that come to mind, 2020, Trey and Vernon were both on first. 2019, Zion and RJ. When you kind of have that dynamic, usually you don't have anybody else making a push for All ACC on those teams. Like Cam wasn't really going to get it, and Cassius Stanley wasn't really going to get it. But this year, I think that's a little different. Like I think Cooper's obviously the player of the year. You've got Tyrese there, and I think Con Knipple is an All ACC level player as well. So I think they could have three guys, and I think should have three guys because of the quality. But we'll see how that all shakes out in a couple of weeks. But moving on a little bit to actually before we move on to Virginia, let's talk about the Caleb Foster situation. He scored, and it seemed like he was a little bit angry because he doesn't come in really much at all, and plays there at the very end of the game against Stanford. Ends up scoring 10 points, just 6 minutes. Probably the best basketball we've seen Caleb Foster play in months, which is a good sign. But then I guess now looking back at it, when he really doesn't play much against Virginia either, doesn't check in for a very long time in that game, and ultimately only scores 1 point. It doesn't really seem like it was a sign of what's to come. It was maybe just a blip. I mean, what did you think about that little spurt from Caleb?
Well, for all these games, I do a little one-page write-up, and I put the good stuff on the left side, and I put the bad stuff on the right side. And Caleb has spent most of the year on the right-hand side, unfortunately. Yeah, he did have that one breakout moment, if you will, 10 points in 6 minutes, I think it was, where he was playing like he had nothing to lose because he probably had nothing to lose. But then reverted right back to form against Virginia with a big offer from the field, and so really it was maybe just a blip, and he's back on the right hand side of my page now with that performance against Virginia.
So let's look at that Virginia game then, or at least they're not the Virginia of old anymore. That game, and they mentioned it on the broadcast, but that game used to be one where you gritted your teeth, and it was just unbearable to watch them play Virginia every year. I mean, because Virginia was consistently a threat in some way under Tony Bennett, and those games were tough. This game really wasn't that tough, but it was for the first few minutes of the game, maybe. But I remember going into, I think it might have been the under 16, or yeah, or maybe the under 12. I don't know. It was one of the two, and it was 13-12 Duke. But I remember thinking, I think Virginia had just played the best offensive basketball it possibly could have mustered to score those 12 points, shooting with incredible efficiency to start the game, and they were down one. And I remember looking at that and going, they're screwed. Like Duke's going to bury them. Because if they'd started like that, it was 12-3, sure. And maybe a Virginia team of old could have done that. This one just doesn't have the same defensive moxie. Those Virginia fans might have wanted to think they did when Cooper Flagg got blocked and they lost their mind with the moment that I would akin to the Chris Paul cuts it to 42 type moment. But that was, I mean, they got really excited every time anything negative happened with Cooper Flagg. I guess that just speaks to his influence and how much opposing fans are thinking about him, right? But overall, this was a game that Duke did not struggle in whatsoever. Looked good from start to finish. Even though Virginia started well, they adjusted, took them out of the game, and kept flowing on offense.
Yeah, it was definitely a relaxing win. Nice to have one of those against Virginia. They don't play the same game that they used to play by any stretch. I think we kind of owed them after they sent NC State to us in the ACC tournament last year and sent State on that magical run that nobody.
Well, I think it was actually the other way around. We sent State to them. Yeah, because we had them in the quarters, and then we sent them to
Oh,
Virginia.
is that the
Actually,
way it unfolded?
yeah. If anything, Virginia owed us
Okay.
one,
Well,
but
I
but that
misremembered. I
didn't happen.
thought that was the game that sent them to play us in the next round. So anyway, I thought that Flagg seemed a little bit to press. Maybe the crowd was getting to him a little bit. I mean, he still had a Flagg-like game, 17 points, 14 rebounds, far from ordinary. But he seemed to press, especially after that block where he was like, all right, I'm going to show these guys. And that was very uncharacteristic for him to not let the game come to him after that. But I think he was wanting to show the crowd something.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility there. I mean, maybe on offense there were some possessions where I thought he acted a little uncharacteristically, but I think overall he still showed that main characteristic of his that I love, which finds a way to impact winning no matter what. That 14 rebounding game that wasn't something that I saw coming before the day started, but it was something that he turned in, and it was huge. I mean, that was huge. Duke destroyed Virginia on the boards, destroyed them. That's probably the biggest advantage they had in that game, and that was spearheaded by Cooper. And he's outsized. He's not the biggest guy on the floor, not even Duke's biggest guy, but he's out there working hard, getting those boards, doing the dirty work, and that's what I love about him. And so maybe he gets blocked on a dunk. Oh well, he still scores 17 points, but those 14 rebounds, that's where he really made impact felt, I think.
He did. What was more bothersome to me was Malawach's return to form. Here's a guy who's 7'2" and he plays 20 minutes and he ends up with 2 points and 4 rebounds. That's we're just not seeing the kind of production out of him up and down. Yeah, he had a good game against Stanford, but then he also had a sort of reversion to the mean against Virginia, and he's going to have to step up, especially now that Malik is injured, and we're back to having to ask several people to help fill that void.
Yeah, you're right. So Malawach hasn't been totally consistent, not consistent how we would like him to be, right? And so that's been kind of tough, the up and down nature of the game. And you led perfectly kind of into our next topic, right? Malik Brown. Um, so Malik dislocates his shoulder, ball connects with his arm, unsure of exactly what that does. He might have some sort of history with a dislocation already, and that kind of just popped it right back out of socket. We're not sure the severity of this injury yet. We know it's a dislocated shoulder. We know he's not going to play against Illinois. Um, John said that they would reevaluate next week. To me, that sounds like he probably doesn't play next week either. Um, This, I don't think, sounds and hopefully isn't a season-ending injury. I think he will play again. I think an interesting dynamic to kind of look at is the fact that the last time he had an injury made a return against Carolina. Could we be seeing a similar dynamic here on the second time? It does suck for him that he keeps being the guy that gets hurt, and it was a play that didn't seem like it was like, wow, kind of shocking that he got hurt in the way he did on that play. Um, Duke's certainly going to miss Malik Brown, but I think the amount of actual impact it has on the team, we'll see that kind of by what the timetable looks like. If he's back by the Carolina game, I'm not that concerned about it.
Yeah, my expectation, I mean, I was like everybody going to Google immediately afterward, trying to research shoulder separations and how long do they last. And it said anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks, depending on severity. It didn't look like much of anything on the play. He just reached his arm out and then, apparently it popped out. And don't know if that's something that he's suffered before. It kind of just looked freakish. I mean, there was no contact, nothing. And so I'm hopeful he'll come back sooner rather than later, certainly by the ACC tournament. But if he wants to make a habit of coming back just for the Carolina games, that would be fine with me. Would welcome him a little bit earlier if he's able to make it. We're definitely going to need him. He's a difference maker. And I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic he'll be back.
Well, let's talk about that Carolina game, right? Because I think there are a lot of Duke fans right now that are disinterested in that game, kind of talking their talk, saying, that's an easy one, no issues there. But I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate right now, and some people might not love this, but Carolina tonight, as we're recording this, leading NC State 54-26 at the half, blowing them right out of the water. While it's snowing outside, State's going to have a real slow and horrible ride home to Raleigh. But we're looking at the end of the season kind of for the Tar Heels and what their schedule looks like. When you look at that, there aren't a lot of opportunities for the Heels to realistically lose unless they really screw up between now and when they play Duke, host Duke, that is. Obviously blowing State out right now. They got Virginia next game at home. I don't see that being much of a problem. They've got at Florida State. That's probably the only real opportunity for them to lose before the Duke game. Miami at home, no chance. At Virginia Tech, I don't think so. They just scored like 36 points or something crazy, like against Boston College. So don't think Virginia Tech is going to pose much of a problem. So there's a real possibility that Carolina is on a 6-game winning streak heading into Duke, and its final game of the year in a game that in that situation would almost certainly put them into the tournament field because the committee and everybody making brackets right now wants so badly to put Carolina in. Like they should not be on the bubble at all, but they are because they're Carolina and everybody wants them in. So if you give them an excuse, they will. And the excuse is everybody's going to think they're hot and doing really well and they're a good team now if they head into that Duke game on a 6-game winning streak, even though none of those wins would be particularly impressive. But let me draw a parallel here. That kind of run, or part of this run, would be a eking out a win at Syracuse, avoiding a loss there. That sounds awfully familiar to me. That reminds me of the 2022 Tar Heels who eked out a win against Syracuse, where Cole Swider had like 36 points on their head, didn't matter. Carolina won that. Very next game, they beat Duke. They headed into Durham, I think, on a 4-game winning streak, and that game solidified their, ascension from the bubble, and the rest is history, right? This is a Carolina team that has reminded me of that one. They're talented. They have the skill. Now, they lack the front court. There's no doubt about that. But they have the skill, and the last thing you want to give a skilled team is belief. And so for me right now, I think March 8th could be potentially, if Carolina doesn't slip up between now and then, could be a moment of destiny for Duke. It could be like, look, 3 years ago, you were a significantly better team than Carolina, and you let them come into your house, steal one, and then kind of just muddy up everything. Right now, you've got a chance to see a Carolina team coming in, playing with its tournament hopes on the line, and you could put your foot on their throat in their house and reverse the script. And I think that's going to be a big game and a lot bigger than some people think it is right now.
Well, it's always a big game for sure. I don't see this team resembling the 2022 team in the way that they're playing. Yeah, they're blowing out State tonight. By the way, I heard that things have gotten so bad in Chapel Hill that they have to let people in the stadium for free, and so that is not a good sign. They couldn't even fill it up. But no, so yeah, I don't see a Brady Manick on the horizon who's going to catch fire like his red hair indicated he was on fire. Um, I do like the fact that we have Cooper Flagg on our side, National Player of the Year, which, we had Paulo, 3 years ago, but it's going to be a big game for them, yes, because there ain't no way they're getting into the tournament unless they either win that game and at least a couple more in the ACC tournament, or I think they're done. Yes, it's hard to drive a stake through Dracula, I know, and it's hard to put them out. But last I saw, they were next four out, or so they're not even on the bubble. So they have a lot of work to do.
They're halfway in the bubble, halfway out. But I will say the bar for them is significantly lower than it is for everybody else. Like when you look at SMU only having 6 losses and they're roughly in the same position as Carolina, and like Wake is barely in, barely out, depending where you look. And I think they've got 7 losses. And so Carolina has 11. Like, why are they even in the conversation at all? Because of what's on the front of their jersey. And I just know, I know how people are going to talk about this. They're going to see all those wins rack up in a row. Carolina fans they're going to start talking crazy. They're going to start talking crazy. So Cooper Flagg and company, they'll have an opportunity to put a stop to that. And I think they will, ultimately. I think this team is a little different. But all I'm saying is never look past them. Never look past them. And talking about, I guess, never looking past somebody, Duke does have its best opponent in the regular season left on paper coming up this Saturday. A lot of weird stuff, going on with Illinois right now, right? So Morez Johnson, they're one of their big men, broke his wrist. He's out for the rest of the year for the Illini, so that's a big story to watch. While, Duke has lost Malik Brown, they've lost Johnson as well, so it's kind of a tit-for-tat loss in the interior there. Also, a virus is running through the Illinois team, kind of in a similar way that it did for Duke. It seems maybe even a little bit more so for Illinois right now. And I think Underwood said that they skipped the handshake line after getting blown out by Wisconsin earlier this week because they didn't want to get Wisconsin sick, even though you just spent 2 hours playing a basketball game with them.
Yeah.
But don't shake their hand or anything. That's going to get them sick. But I am a little worried about that because Duke they really just rebounded from a long stint of a virus working through the whole roster and coaching staff and everything. And so I don't want to see a second one hit them right before March, right? So that would really suck. That's something to kind of think about. There's nothing you can really do about it, but that does suck. Looking at Illinois as a team, they're unranked now where they were ranked for a while this season. They just got blown out. They've lost 2 straight now. Still projected a 6 seed in ESPN's latest bracketology. They have Kasparis Yakuchonis, who is a projected top 5 pick in the NBA draft. So certainly there will be a lot of young talent there with 4 projected lottery picks between the two. Illinois is a good team. They've got the firepower to beat Duke. I think ultimately, though, it's in Madison Square Garden, a.k.a. Duke North. Illinois is sick. They're injured. Even if they get Duke sick, Duke won't be sick when they play that game. I don't like Illinois' chances.
I don't either. I mean, I can't get worried about it. I'd love to get all worked up, but I can't. I think we're going to beat them. It's our home away from home. I think we've got most of our adversity behind us, hopefully in the rearview mirror with playing past the fever um, among the team. So, yeah, I mean, losing Malik hurts, but like you said, they're also down a player. Uh, I like our chances to take care of business. The Clemson loss, I think, has been a good thing. It's refocused the team, galvanized them, and so sad to say, Fighting Illini, I believe you're going to rack up an L Saturday night.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. That'll be one I don't get to watch live. Uh, my job taking me away from things once again, but I'll watch it back, and we'll definitely have some discussions about it. The last few things I want to talk about, just a few points that I still want to go back to for the Virginia game. One, I mentioned Jalen Blake's earlier from Stanford and his 2 points. Well, on Monday when I posted like the game edit, I said that this is the TJ Power game. It turns out there was significantly less TJ Power than expected. 3 minutes from TJ. I actually didn't even notice that he played 3 minutes, but I went back on the box and saw that he did because I was going to say he didn't play at all, but that's not true actually. But when you look at TJ Power, this is one of the most just crazy kind of things to me. When you think about it logically, you're like, this is a former 5-star player who, at moments, looked pretty decent at Duke. Like he was the ninth man for an Elite Eight team. Yeah, he only averaged 2 points. That's not that abnormal for one of the lower quality 5-stars that come into Duke and play a bench role. And when you look at his shooting splits, I mean, almost 36% from three, 33 from the floor is not great, but like those aren't atrocious. Right now, that man at Virginia is shooting 18% from three, 18, and 20.9% from the floor. That I don't even know what to say about that. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, isn't it weird? I mean, these players that Duke recruited, so you would think, okay, they're good players, right? And then they transfer out, go to other programs, and they turn into not good players. So what does that tell you? I mean, is it? I mean, there's been a lot going on at Virginia, obviously, with Bennett leaving, and so but still, does Duke do that great a job of coaching them up and developing players to where, it's so glaring when they leave and they don't get that player development and they turn into a nothing burger? It's kind of wild. We were fretful about all these guys that we were losing last year, and it turns out I mean, nobody's really performing at a high level that I'm aware of. And instead, we got other guys and we coached them up and they're better. So players flourish in the Duke program. They flourish in the developmental aspect of being there in ways that they don't seem to when they go somewhere else.
I think it's wild just how much context matters in college basketball. Like where you're at matters so much. When you look at some of the guys that left Duke, particularly last season, obviously there's power not getting better but actually regressing at a team that you would think you would have more opportunity playing for. And then there's like Jalen Blakes, who weirdly averages 15 points a game now. Like, yeah, it's at Stanford, but like that's pretty freaking impressive. Like, I didn't think he had that in him at a Power 5 school, but here he is, easily the best transfer across the entire board of all of them, and that's including Jeremy Roach, who's averaging 10 points a game at a kind of middling Baylor team. Like, he's doing less at Baylor than he was for ACC championship team at Duke and an Elite Eight team at Duke. And that's wild. Only shooting 38% from the floor, not having a horrible season, but a worse season than he was the previous two at Duke. And then it's like Sean Stewart should have some opportunity at Ohio State. He's gotten better. He's putting up better numbers, but like 6-6, for a guy that was ranked 13th going to Duke? Is that really where you want to be? And then, Jamin Brakefield, Henry Coleman, those are guys that have been successful at their schools for years now since they left Duke, but kind of hit a ceiling and never got past a certain point. And I can't help but think, like, what would they have looked like if they played out their whole career at Duke? I don't know. And then it's like for Jalen Blakes, he wasn't going to do what he's doing now in Durham. Would Jeremy Roach be doing what he's doing now in Durham? I don't know. I think everything worked out for the better for Duke. At least I think that they put together the best team they possibly could have. I don't think they miss anybody that entered the portal. But it is so interesting to see how the context of the school you choose to transfer to impacts a ton.
Grass is not always greener. Christian Reeves, not exactly killing it at Clemson. Not sure how Mark Mitchell is doing. Are you following him?
He's doing fairly well, actually. So, like, Missouri is a pretty decent team this season, and I would say Mark might be the most successful. I said Jalen Blakes was, but I think Mark probably is. I think he averages 12 or 13, somewhere in there. That's the last time I had checked it. But Mark's done well, and Missouri has done significantly better than anticipated. So I do think Mark Mitchell has been the most successful of the transfers.
I think Blake's, he had already run his course. Roach had already run his course. It was almost like they had no place to go at Duke. And sometimes, I guess hopping over the fence can be a refresher, a restart for a career to go somewhere else. And Blake's has definitely surprised me. I didn't see that coming. But he's welcome to drop in at the Smith Center anytime he would like and work on.
And he's welcome back in Cameron whenever he wants to.
Oh, sure. If he wants to go 1 for 10, sure, he can come back. Well, welcome him.
Poor Jalen. We love Jalen. He was at the K Academy this summer, too. And I love to see that. I think that was a similar dynamic with Jordan Goldwire when he was a graduate transfer to Oklahoma. So when you graduate, I think it's kind of a different ballgame, right? Like, you got that degree from Duke, you're more than welcome at everything. Like, we still claim you. And so 2 more things to talk about. 1, Isaiah Evans, 17 points, ballistic shooting again. Proves time and time again that he hates passing. Like, if Isaiah Evans is, I saw somebody say that if he's like a PlayStation controller, he doesn't have an X button, can't pass. That's very true. Like, I've never seen anyone, like, he's the most, like, microwave type player of all time. Just comes in, shoots a million times anytime he touches the ball. But when he's on, man, I mean, when he's on, Duke doesn't lose. Plain and simple.
I think 6 went in, and the 7th one didn't even touch the rim. So, it's going up, and if he makes the first one, watch out. He might make a bunch. That game was kind of reminiscent of the Auburn game, the way he lit Virginia up.
If I was playing basketball at Duke, which, mind you, that could never happen, but if I were and I was his teammate, I would be boxing out the second I saw somebody pass him the ball. Like, it doesn't matter where he's at on the floor, whether he should shoot when he gets it or not. As soon as I saw somebody pass him the ball, I'm putting a body on. I'm boxing out. That dude's putting it up. There's 0 question in my mind. But, it's crazy to me that Duke has a guy that I would describe as like their 8th, 9th man that has the greenest green light of all green lights ever. And I'm fine with it, which is weird because I don't think Duke's ever had a player that deep on the bench where I've been like, yeah, he can shoot whatever he wants. But I kind of feel that way with that. Well, I mean, I don't feel anything he wants. Like, if the game was really tight and he shot a heavily contested 3, that was sort of a heat check, I'd probably be a little bit upset about it unless he hit it. But relatively speaking, I'm totally fine with pretty much any shot he takes, which is a wild thing to say about a 9th man.
And his minutes are creeping up. He had 22 minutes, so he managed those 17 points in 22 minutes, and it was the 4th most of anybody. I really liked the way the minutes were spread out in that game. I think John learned something when he wore out Flagg a few games ago to be more equitable with the minutes distribution, and I really think it's paying dividends to see him, at 30 instead of 38, and so I like what I'm seeing in that regard. We're still going 8 deep, even with Malik out, we're still an 8 deep team, and so I like that as well, that we have good balance.
Well, I think getting Mason Gillis helped with that too. Like getting him back, that's something that kind of flew under the radar was him being absent, and so I think him coming back has really helped alleviate some of the stress on Cooper, and to a lesser extent also on Khan. So that was a big deal. But let's talk about Cooper as our last point. It's obviously one of the biggest questions in college basketball right now is who is the national player of the year? Is it Cooper Flagg? Is it Janai Broome? I think Auburn fans spend about half their time trying to discredit Cooper Flagg. I mean, I can't blame them. Look, I mean, if you're Auburn, you've never really been in this position before where you've got a guy who, by all stretches of the imagination, is putting up a National Player of the Year season. And Janai Broome, like, there's most seasons he would, without question, be the consensus National Player of the Year. But in most seasons, Cooper Flagg would be, without question, the consensus National Player of the Year. But they both have happened to occur at the same time. So my question to you is, and throw your Duke hat out the window for a second, if you can. And let's say, not do you think Cooper Flagg should win National Player of the Year? Do you think he will?
I think he should. I think he will. I think he is. Remember a few years ago when it was Chet Holmgren versus Paulo Banchero, and who's going to go number one versus number two in the draft? Come on, it's Cooper Flagg, man. To me, this is like a no-brainer. If I'm a GM sitting in that chair with the number one pick, Cooper Flagg, man. I mean, he's a generational player. Janai Broome, okay. I mean, he's solid. He's not better than Cooper Flagg. It's not even close. I don't know what we're even talking about. There, I took my Duke hat off for you.
So I agree. I think Cooper Flagg is a significantly better basketball player than Janai Broome. I think there's zero doubt about that. But I think when you look at the history of the National Player of the Year award and you look at who do they like to give it to, they love to give it as a career achievement award. Oh, they love that. I think about the 2015 season. Look at Frank Kaminsky versus Jaleel Okafor. Statistically speaking, those guys were pretty much completely even. Outside of the fact that Kaminsky shot threes and he shot better from the free throw line. Okafor was probably a slightly better rebounder. Certain other things Okafor did slightly better. And then when you look at the fact that Okafor's team won head-to-head both times, and he was the national champion, but Kaminsky swept the National Player of the Year race in that one. And I've always thought that that was because they wanted to give it to Kaminsky as a career achievement award. Now, this time I think it's a little different because I think that Cooper is better than Okafor. I do absolutely think that Cooper Flagg is going to win National Player of the Year in some capacity because there's like 8 of them. There's like 8 National Player of the Year trophies, right? So there's like the Rupp Award, the Robertson, the Wooden, the Naismith, NABC, AP. There's a million of them. He's not, in my opinion, going to sweep them. Somebody's giving Janai Broome National Player of the Year. I don't know if it's going to be like a 50-50 trophy split, if it's going to be 75-25 Cooper, but both of those guys are going to end this season with a National Player of the Year trophy. That's my take. I don't know who wins which ones, and most of the time there's more stock given to the Wooden Award probably. That's the one they're trying to raise up as being akin to the Heisman Award. But really, certain ones don't hold a ton of weight, but I'd say like Wooden, Naismith, AP, those are probably the main 3. I'll be happy if Cooper wins 2 out of 3 of those.
Yeah. I would like to sweep Broome, pun intended. But yeah, you're probably right. He'll probably win 1 or 2 of them, and that's okay. I think consensus, it'll be Flagg and should be.
Yeah. So that's that discussion. A lot to talk about this time around. A lot of hot button things, but we're kind of getting to the end of the regular season. It's going to be award season soon. really looking forward to that. Looking forward to the conclusion of the regular season. Looking forward to seeing Duke play Carolina again on March 8th. And looking forward to the postseason with this team, man, because they're a lot of fun. And I think we're going to have a long postseason if everything goes the way it should. As always, thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever it is you listen. Follow Duke Wisdom on Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. And we will talk to you guys later.